of look back at some of these older games, particularly Borderlands 2, now that we've got more games in the franchise, and do kind of a retrospective on Borderlands 2 of like, why is Borderlands 2 so widely loved? Why is it held up so well? And why do so many people still claim it's the best Borderlands game? If I really have to be honest with myself, I think 4 has the potential to outdo 2. And 4, it's too new to judge 4. We haven't had any DLC package, and it's hard to look at like Borderlands 2 vanilla compared to what Borderlands 2 is now. It's just not a fair comparison, so I don't want to put Borderlands 4 in that conversation yet, but I hope with the full package it's there. You know, there's a wide split between people that think, you know, Borderlands 2 is the best, Borderlands 3 is the best. But like Borderlands 3 should be better than Borderlands 2. It's the next game. The engine does way more. You have more movement, bigger guns, like bigger story, the takedowns, so much. But with all of that, a lot of people still stick to Borderlands 2 as the best game, and not just because of the story. You know, Handsome Jack versus the twins, the villains. You know, that's an obvious one. But I think the Borderlands 2 lore and the love for it is just way, way more than just Jack in the story. So I wanted to look at that. And the first thing I kept thinking about as I was playing Borderlands 4 was the enemies and the enemy design. And this partially got me thinking. I stopped by Mopey's Twitch stream and asked him how he's liking it. And one of the things he said is the combat all feels samey. And the game was so new to me, I wasn't quite feeling that yet. I didn't have enough hours in yet, but now I'm starting to feel it a little bit. And one of the first things I thought of was loaders. And I was doing the video the other day, talked about it'd be nice to have you know, go back to Elpis and kind of have a TPS themed DLC. And I mentioned like, hey, maybe there's still loaders floating around there. And I really miss loaders. And it's also some of the wildlife. But before I talked about the wildlife, I wanted to just talk about the loaders. The loaders was such a juxtaposition from human enemies. You know, our human enemies were all like shield and flesh. Where the loaders, there was some shield, but it was mostly armor and corrosive. So it took different weapons, took different weapon sets. And yeah, loaders were like big and bulky and had, what, 5 crit spots between arms, arm joints, leg joints, and eye. They were slow moving and like, you know, somewhat it's cannon fodder. But what made loader combat interesting wasn't your base loaders is, you know, all of a sudden a bow loader would come, and then there's reflection, and then there was like your power loaders, which also gave you reflection. Basically, reflection's annoying. But then you'd get some of them, like the ions, that would throw up shields. Then, of course, then constructors would come in, and constructors were great. Especially like the super badass constructors. Like they had a massive health pool. You know, they were putting out other loaders, which made it hard just to focus them down. They threw out their turrets. There'd be surveyors. But also, well, a lot of loaders were easy to kill in their cannon fodder. Then you get like jet loaders that would fly in, sneak behind you, and hit you with a rocket launcher and just wipe your ass down. If you didn't pay attention to what loader is what, you targeted the wrong ones. The rocket loaders, was that what they were called with the rocket launchers? I think they were just called rocket loaders. They would just blow you out of the way because they'd have two, a lot of times powerful, like Maliwan and sometimes even like E-Tech launchers that would just rip you to shreds if you didn't focus on them. Loader spots could be legit scary, and they would change how you focus combat. You know, super badass loaders and war loaders and ultimate badass loaders. They really altered the way you approach combat, and the Circle of Slaughter with loaders. Not, I keep wanting to say Washburn Refinery, but the Circle of Slaughter with just loaders. There's no like boss on that thing, but that thing was tough. That was a legit hard thing. Both rounds 4 and 5 were very difficult. and could easily take you down and just get overwhelmed, and that was awesome combat. So, you know, fast forward to Borderlands 4, and, you know, when Mopey, you know, said that to me and as a response to my question, and it really made me think that, like, yeah, in Borderlands 4, if I'm fighting Rippers or Order, I don't really notice a big difference between fighting Rippers and Order. And that's, you know, most of the combat is your humanoid combat, and it's one of those two. And they both kind of feel the same. Like, sure, Order's got, like, your blockhead enemies or whatnot, but they don't feel like Instructors did. And you get some badass enemies that change things up, your crystal enemies, but that's kind of like the same, whether it's human or Order. It's not really different. So yeah, I kind of just think that different, like, enemy design in Borderlands 2 was just so good with them, that it really, really, like, changed up combat and made, like, a loader area feel different than a humanoid area, where we don't necessarily have that as much right now in Borderlands 4, and hopefully with DLCs they take more of that into account and change up our enemy designs more. The next one I wanted to talk about was wildlife. I think Borderlands 2 was also peak design for enemy wildlife. Since Borderlands 2, we really haven't felt the same. You know, pre-sequel, it wasn't as good, even though there's some interesting things there. Borderlands 3 wildlife didn't feel as great either. Yeah, I think there's many parts of it. One is, like, rabbits and tubbies. Like, you always had to be on the lookout, because so far now, when I'm, like, running through Borderlands 3, like, yes, there are some badass enemies of the wildlife, but they don't really have an effect. It's like, okay, they die quick and they're done. Okay. But, like, a rabid stalker would legit ruin your day, especially if you got, like, 2 rabid stalkers going after you. Like, that was a tough time. And I'm not feeling that so much in Borderlands 4. You know, especially, like, when UVHM first came out, it's like, holy crap, these rabbits are scary. Then a tubby comes and, you know, ouch. But also we had Varkids. And the evolving Varkids is something they haven't done since. Like, there was a little evolution in Borderlands 3 with Varkids, but it wasn't the same as trying to farm Vermi. And, like, farming Vermi with the Varkids that's just, like, a big, like, end game pastime a lot of people did, and I don't know why they haven't brought that back. Evolving enemies was a ton of fun, and that's something that, like, they did so well in Borderlands 2, and now we just, like, don't have that as well in other games. Not just Varkids, we had that with Goliaths too, going back to humanoid enemies. You know, farming up a Godliath was a lot of fun. Watching him kill other enemies and making sure he doesn't aggro you, like, it was a thing to do. And then we even, in the Headhunters, got a Godliath boss, and the Valentine's Headhunter. So, yeah, we had all these great enemy designs, and I just feel like the wildlife was more threatening and more interesting to fight in Borderlands 2. Same thing with, like, Threshers in Borderlands 2 were amazing. Like, they were annoying and I hated them, especially as a Maya player when you couldn't phase lock them. But, like a Rift Thresher would ruin your day, and then if you got, like, a badass Thresher spawn, like, that was super scary and would just be so hard to overcome. He'd come out of nowhere and just, like, health gate you, and then you're dotted, and then shit, I'm in trouble. Yeah, Threshers were a legit, like, threat. Like I said, yeah, those Rift Threshers would mess you up. Even if some of that stuff was, like, annoying, it made you focus and pay attention and be aware. And hopefully we get extra difficulty and stuff in Borderlands 4, so, like, you feel that a little bit more, because right now it's like, oh, wildlife, I look at it and they're dead. There's no threat, there's no thought or anything. It's just kind of, you know, cannon fodder. It's like just fighting a bunch of pup skags with no scary rabbits or alphas with them. I will say some things, like even like I think spider ants, which were still the most threatening in Borderlands 1. For some reason, like their armor plating was the most effective in Borderlands 1, where you really had to like work around and get to their butt. Where the other games, you kind of just shoot around their armor and hit them. So yeah, I still think spider ants for some reason been just going slightly downhill since Borderlands 1 as far as threatening enemies. Outside of maybe like the Black Queen and some cool variations on them. Yeah, spider ants still win the day for 1. But yeah, I think a lot of this enemy design is just what's like made Borderlands 2 endearing, because there's so many times I could just like run through like Southpaw or Bloodshot, and it's like these aren't like Digi-Peak runs or even like Lynchwood. Yeah, there's so many different ways to like run through Borderlands 2 and just still enjoy it, and that's because the base enemies were so good. The fights were just interesting and dynamic, and they would change. And there's a lot of times I liked mobbing in Borderlands 2 better than raid bosses, because raid bosses were so predictable. I know it's fun for a lot of people, like especially the time trials, like setting up that like perfect kill, and you go through all these steps, and you put a lot of thought into it, and like, all right, I do this, then this, then this, and this, and then I get god damage, and the boss dies, and that's awesome in its own right. But raid bosses are also really predictable. Like I thought killing Pyro Pete was the most like boring and tedious and predictable thing. It's like, okay, knock off his mask, spam him with the Sandhawk, he does his animation, run behind the post, dodge the Nova, come back, Sandhawk, okay, dead. Like there was no threat, there was no surprise. It was just like, I know exactly what's going to happen, and then he's dead. Where when you're fighting groups of mobs, the spawns are somewhat random, and like different enemies will spawn with different weapons, making them a different threat level, and sometimes in different places, and depending on how you react, they react, and like it was more chaotic and less predictable, and I enjoy that. But yeah, like I said, they're so good. So like yeah, like running Flint's, was it Flint's, the Circle of Slaughter for Humans? No, that's Finks area. I think that was Flint's. No, that's the enemy. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. But like the Circles of Slaughter in Borderlands 2, even though they weren't repeatable, like I really loved them. Not so much the creature one, but that's more of a map design, even though you can farm Vermi in it. It was just so flat. The other ones had more like texture and like interesting maps, but I loved running those, and they were just so different and so interesting and so unique, and just so many different maps to run and play with. And you know, it's something like the pre-sequel didn't have as much. They didn't have those good just mobbing maps. And then like we got the Peak, which was like just the ultimate mob run. Even though I wish, like, when they did the Peak 9 and 10, they changed up levels on it to make it more interesting, because running it the same way too many times does get dull. But yeah, and then, like, takedowns in Borderlands 3 were, like, awesome, like, extended versions of the Peak, kind of, in my opinion. But, yeah, Borderlands 4, it's just, I don't know, the enemy design isn't quite as good as Borderlands 2, and not as diverse. I do like a lot of things about the enemies in Borderlands 4, but like that was kind of leveling up. But now that I've got to max level, the fighting most of the enemies just feels like the exact same fight. It's just human enemies. I pop in the head and they die. So yeah, I just kind of miss a little bit of Borderlands versatility of the fights, and just like what the different enemies in these did, and just, you know, the different feel of combat with like loaders versus wildlife versus humans. You know, again, like the super bad, the ultimate bad, the rabbits, the loots, the loot midgets, the Varkids, and evolving enemies. And a lot of this was just so good, and I think it's a big reason why like Borderlands 2 just like refuses to die, and people keep going back to it. And no matter how many other games they put out, you know, the pre-sequel, Borderlands 3, Wonderlands, Borderlands 4, there's a huge base that still sticks to Borderlands 2 and keeps playing it, even though this game is old as sin. And, you know, we don't have all the modern movement mechanics. There hasn't been anything new added to Borderlands 2 in so long outside of modding. And, man, people just keep playing it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I kind of just want to use this, do a couple of videos exploring that and looking at different topics of Borderlands 2 and like, why was it so successful and why has it stood the test of time like very few games do, especially for like a not live service game that's not constantly updating. You know, you're obviously there's like your World of Warcrafts and stuff, but like most games don't have the life of Borderlands 2. Very few do, and I think it's worth exploring that. So thanks for watching. I'm going to be doing some more of these, and I hope you enjoy them. Let me know your thoughts on what makes Borderlands 2 so great. So I think it might be fun to just look back and talk about some of that stuff. Thanks for watching. Bye.